The couch cushions had molded to the shape of my spine after 3 weeks of restless nights. I buried my face deeper into the coarse fabric, inhaling the scent of my son Ryan's aftershave mixed with the vanilla candles his wife Laura loved, a combination that had become the smell of my exile. Through the thin apartment walls, I could hear them whispering in their bedroom, discussing me like a problem to be solved, not the woman who raised him. At 62, I never imagined I'd be sleeping on a pull-out sofa in my own son's living room. My entire life now fit into 2 suitcases tucked behind the television. The divorce papers were still warm from the lawyer's printer when Ryan offered me this temporary solution. Temporary, as if the collapse of a 30-year marriage were a minor inconvenience. Morning light filtered through Laura's pristine white curtains, casting shadows on the hardwood floors I wasn't allowed to walk on in shoes. Every rule in this house was unspoken, but absolute. Don't use the good towels. Don't touch the thermostat. Don't cook anything that leaves a smell. Mom, you're up early, Ryan said, appearing in the kitchen doorway already dressed in his charcoal suit. At 35, he'd inherited his father's sharp jawline and my stubbornness, though he seemed to have forgotten where the latter came from. Couldn't sleep, I replied, stirring instant coffee with water microwaved in a mug. The good coffee maker was off limits, a wedding gift from Laura's mother. Laura and I were talking, he said, loosening his tie slightly. We think it's time you started looking into more permanent options. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Permanent options. Assisted living. They have great programs now, social activities, meals, everything. Of course. Silly me, thinking I could stay here until I got back on my feet. Don't say that. You know we want to help. Help. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Ryan, yesterday you took Laura's mom to tour that new complex on Maple Street. The one with granite countertops. His Adam's apple twitched. That's different. Cynthia has special needs. She has a lovely home she refuses to sell. My special need is a place to sleep that isn't your couch. Laura entered, her blonde hair swept into a sleek bun, already dressed for her job at the marketing firm. Good morning, Stephanie, she said, not looking up from the blender. Using my full name instead of a mom felt deliberate. Good morning, dear. Ryan was just telling me about your plans for your mother's new apartment. Laura's hand froze on the blender button. Mom needed a change of scenery. The house felt too big after Dad's death. Of course, 3 bedrooms are huge for one person. I glanced pointedly around their 2-bedroom apartment. Mom, what about the nursery? Ryan cleared his throat. What about it? The spare bedroom was vacated last week, painted a soft yellow in preparation for their first child. Laura needed a place to set up the nursery. She was anxious about the preparations, and with the birth approaching. I wasn't suggesting you sleep there all the time, Ryan. Just until I find another place. One night in a real bed, maybe 2. Laura finally looked at me. Stephanie, I think you're missing the point. It's a matter of boundaries, of what's appropriate. Appropriate. I repeated slowly. And what would be appropriate for a woman whose husband, after 30 years of marriage, decided to trade her for his secretary? Mom. No, Ryan, let me understand. Your unborn child needs their own room more than your homeless mother needs a bed. Color drained from his face. You're not homeless. You have options. Dad offered you a condo in Florida. Your father offered me a studio apartment 2,000 miles from my only child, on the condition that I give up any claim to half of our assets. Laura's smoothie came back to life, drowning out anything Ryan might say. If you wanted comfort, he finally said in a barely audible whisper, you should have stayed married to Dad. His words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at my son, this person I had carried, fed, raised, and loved unconditionally for 35 years, and saw a stranger. I see. I placed the mug in the sink with exaggerated care. Thank you for clarifying my position. Mom, I didn't mean. But I was already walking away. Back to my makeshift bed, my suitcases, and my shame. That evening, I went to the corner store 3 blocks from Ryan's apartment. The owner, Mr. Patel, was used to me buying everything in single servings. 1 can of soup, 1 sleeve of crackers, 1 small container of yogurt. At the checkout, I stared at the lottery ticket display. The jackpot was $3 million. Feeling lucky today, Mrs. Harris? Mr. Patel asked with a kind smile. I looked at the crumpled $10 bill in my hand. Money for gas to get to failed interviews, or food for the next 2 days, or 1 ticket. One random chance, I heard my own voice say. The machine spat out a small rectangular piece of paper with the numbers 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, and the additional number 18. Good luck, said Mr. Patel. The apartment was empty when I returned. A note on the counter said Ryan and Laura had gone out to dinner at the new place of her mother. I settled on the couch and turned on the evening news. Exactly at 11:17 p.m., during a commercial break, the lottery numbers flashed on the screen. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, additional 18. I stared at the TV, convinced I was hallucinating. Then with trembling hands, I pulled out the ticket and checked the numbers again and again. Every one matched. $3 million. After taxes, maybe $2 million. Enough to buy a house. Enough to never sleep on someone's couch again. I didn't sleep. The lottery ticket lay on the coffee table beside me like a loaded weapon. Every few minutes, I reached for it, comparing the numbers to the TV screenshot. At 5:30 a.m., I heard Ryan's alarm. My body was tense with nervous energy, every muscle clenched from the secret I carried. Good morning, I said quietly, watching him flinch. Oh, Mom, I didn't know you were still awake. Listen, about yesterday, what I said about Dad. You meant every word. Don't insult us both by pretending otherwise. I'm trying to apologize. No, you're trying to cope with your guilt. Laura appeared in an impeccable silk robe. Good morning, Stephanie. How did you sleep? Wonderful. Thanks for asking. Something in my expression made her stop. Ryan, did you remember to pick up the paint samples? I want to finalize the nursery colors this weekend. Already in the car. Mom, we need to talk about timing. Laura's mom is coming next month to help with baby prep, and you'll need the living room. I nodded calmly. Of course, family always comes first. They exchanged a glance, surprised by my reasonable tone. I'll start looking for places today, I continued, standing up and folding the blanket with military precision. Maybe there will be good news by tonight. Good news. Laura's voice held a note of suspicion. A woman my age doesn't have many options, but I'm resourceful. You'd be surprised what's possible when properly motivated. After they left for work, I called the lottery office. The woman who answered clearly had dealt with shocked winners before. Mrs. Harris, congratulations. We need you to come in person to begin the prize claim process. Can you come today? Yes, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork, verification processes, and legal disclaimers. The lump sum payment after federal and state taxes would be approximately $1.8 million. Perfect, I signed my name with a steady hand. I walked out of that building a millionaire, though outwardly nothing had changed. But inside, everything was different. The weight of helplessness was gone, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Instead of returning immediately to the apartment, I went to the public library and spent the day researching real estate listings, property values, and investment strategies. Before marriage, I studied economics, skills I thought had been buried forever under 3 decades of domestic life. By evening, I had identified 3 potential properties: a modest single-story house on 2 acres outside the city, a foreclosure condominium, and something that made my pulse quicken, a 40-acre plot with an old farmhouse, being sold by a family desperate for a quick inheritance settlement. The farmhouse property was perfect. Remote enough for privacy, large enough for possibilities, and the price was right. $300,000, leaving me plenty of capital for renovations and other investments. Ryan was already home when I returned, sitting at the kitchen island with his laptop. Laura was beside him, browsing nursery furniture websites. "How did the job hunt go?" he asked without looking up. "Productive. I might have found something." "Oh." Laura's tone was cautiously hopeful. "What kind of job?" "Consulting. A company needs someone with my experience to evaluate investment opportunities." Not exactly a lie. I was definitely consulting myself on investments. "Sounds promising," Ryan said, though I caught skepticism in his voice. "When do you start?" "Soon. Very soon. I might have to travel a few days to look at some properties the company is considering." "Properties?" Laura's interest sharpened. "For what business?" "Agricultural enterprises, sustainable farming, animal rehabilitation. Growing markets, obviously." I took a bite of cold Chinese food, savoring both the taste and the lie. "The position comes with housing, company property." I watched their faces closely. Relief struggled with suspicion on Ryan's expression, while Laura looked almost disappointed. "Mom, that's great news. I'm happy for you." "Really?" For the first time in weeks, I looked him straight in the eyes. "Because yesterday, you seemed pretty convinced I'd made irreversible mistakes." He had the decency to look awkward. I was upset. "I said things I didn't mean." "No, Ryan. You said things you meant but wished you hadn't said out loud." Laura cleared her throat. "The important thing is that you're moving forward. Finding independence." Independence. I savored the word. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm finding." That night, I lay on the couch for the last time, staring at the ceiling and listening to my son and his wife whispering behind the closed door. Tomorrow I would go see the farmhouse. By the end of the week, I would own it. Within a month, I would be completely transformed from the woman who begged for just one night in the nursery. But transformation was not enough. Justice demanded more than personal success. It demanded consequences for those who showed such casual cruelty to the one they claimed to love. As I fell asleep, I thought about the caretaker's cottage I noticed in the photos of the farmhouse listing. A small, simple structure on the property, originally built for hired hands. Nothing fancy. Just 4 walls, a roof, and minimal amenities. Perfect for housing people suddenly in need of shelter. Perfect for teaching lessons in gratitude and humility. Perfect for the justice that was coming. 3 weeks later, I stood in my own kitchen, watching the morning sun gild the pastures. The transformation had been swift and purposeful. I hired contractors to repair the barn, update the cottage plumbing, and install fencing suitable for horses and smaller animals. Within a month, Meadowbrook had its first residents. 3 horses rescued from a bankrupt stable, 2 goats nobody wanted, and a constantly changing population of dogs and cats from the county shelter. I hired Jeffrey, a 23-year-old veterinary student, to help with daily care. He was grateful to live in the smaller bedroom of the cottage in exchange for work and a modest salary. "Mrs. Harris, the new fence looks great," Jeffrey said one morning while we fed the horses. "These guys are much happier with room to run." "Everyone deserves a place to breathe, Jeffrey. Everyone deserves to feel safe." I hadn't spoken to Ryan in 6 weeks. He called twice during the first month, a caring son checking on his displaced mother, but I let the calls go to voicemail. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned Laura's pregnancy was going well. They finished the nursery in soft yellows and greens, held a baby shower where Laura's mother played hostess in her apartment with granite countertops. They were happy, settled, confident in their choices. That made what happened next even more satisfying. The first sign of trouble was Ryan's LinkedIn post, exploring new opportunities in the financial sector, open to exciting prospects, corporate speak for, I got fired. Within a week, Jeffrey mentioned seeing a young man in an expensive suit asking about me at the hardware store in town. He looked really tense, he told me while we cleaned stalls. Asked if I knew Stephanie Harris. Said he's your son, looking for you. What did you say to him? That I'd never heard that name. Technically not a lie. To me, you're always Mrs. Harris. Smart guy. Ryan's next move was predictable. He hired a private detective. The man was competent enough to trace my trips to the lottery office, discover the property purchase, and learn about my new identity as a consulting entrepreneur. What he couldn't find was the source of my sudden wealth. 2 months after disappearing from his couch, Ryan finally found me. I was on the southern pasture, brushing Thunder's coat under the midday sun, when I heard a car engine struggling down the gravel road. Through the trees, I caught a glimpse of a familiar silver sedan. Ryan's car, the one he insisted was too valuable for me to drive to interviews. I kept brushing Thunder's side, my movement steady and calm. Mom, Ryan's voice carried across the pasture, uncertain and somehow smaller than I remembered. I did not turn around. Mom, I know you can hear me. The Thunder chuckled softly, turning its big head toward the sound. I scratched behind its ears, murmuring reassurances. Finally, I looked up. Ryan stood by the fence line, still in business clothes, even though it was Saturday. His hair was tousled, his usually crisp shirt wrinkled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Laura. I turned to Ryan. And you came here because... Because you're family, he said desperately. Because, no matter what, you're still my mother. I looked at both of them. My son, who had cast me aside when I was inconvenient. His wife, who treated me like an unwelcome guest in their home. Now they stood before me, homeless and desperate, expecting the woman they had rejected to save them. Think about your grandson, Laura said suddenly, her hand moving protectively to her rounded belly. I thought about him. I thought about the child who would learn family loyalty from these two people. I thought about the values he would absorb about how to treat others when they're vulnerable. That's when I smiled and walked toward the cabin, where Jeffrey watched from the porch, clearly enjoying the drama. Jeffrey, could you show our guests their accommodations? Jeffrey stepped down from the cabin porch with the easy grace of someone who belonged exactly where he was. At 23, he had the kind of confidence that comes from knowing your worth. Mrs. Harris, he asked, though his eyes sparkled with barely contained amusement. Jeffrey, this is my son Ryan and his wife Laura. They will be living in the cabin. I paused, letting the words sink in, temporarily, of course. Laura's face went through a series of expressions. Hope, confusion, and finally something close to horror as she really looked at the small structure behind Jeffrey. Stephanie, that's very generous of you, but we were hoping. Hoping for what exactly? I kept my voice pleasant, conversational. The main house, my bedroom, my space. Ryan quickly stepped forward. Mom, we're grateful for anything. We just need somewhere to stay until we get back on our feet. Of course. I gestured toward the cabin, motioning for them to follow. Come on, let me show you your new home. The cabin's front door opened directly into the living room, a space barely big enough for the worn sofa Jeffrey had picked up at a thrift store and a small TV mounted on the wall. The kitchen was visible from the door, its yellowed appliances and chipped laminate countertops a stark contrast to the granite and stainless steel they were used to. "Cozy," Laura said faintly, her manicured hand gliding over the worn countertop. "It has everything you need," I replied. "Running water, electricity, heat. More than many people have." I opened the cupboards, showing basic dishes, mismatched glasses, the kind of kitchenware you find in a discount store. Jeffrey used the second bedroom, but he was moving his things into the main house today. They would have both bedrooms to themselves. Ryan peeked down the narrow hall. "Both bedrooms? Well, one's pretty small. Probably just right for a nursery when the baby arrives." I smiled at Laura's pale face. "You wanted to think about your grandson, didn't you?" The tour continued through the cramped bathroom with its stained tub and 2 bedrooms, one barely large enough for a double bed, the other sized for a child. Everything was clean but worn, functional but without a hint of luxury or comfort. "It's temporary," Ryan said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as us. "Just until I find another job." "I'm sure you will." I returned to the living room, my footsteps echoing on the thin floorboards. "There are a few house rules we need to discuss." Laura sank onto the sofa, her pregnancy making her movements awkward. "Rules? This is a working farm. We start early. Feeding schedule is 5 a.m. The animals don't care about human conveniences," I counted on my fingers. "No loud music or TV after 9 p.m. The horses are sensitive to noise. No unauthorized visitors without prior approval. No alcohol on the property, it scares the rescued animals. And everyone contributes to the work. No exceptions." "Work?" Ryan's voice rose. "Mom, Laura's 7 months pregnant. She can't do farm labor." "Well, I guess you'll have to work twice as hard to make up for that." I met his eyes calmly. "Unless you'd prefer to find another place." Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Through the cabin window, I could see their U-Haul truck, loaded with boxes, furniture, the remnants of their comfortable life. They had nowhere else to go, and we all knew it. "Work starts tomorrow," I continued. "Jeffrey will show you the routine. Feeding, cleaning stalls, fence repairs, general maintenance. It's honest work. Good for building character." Laura's composure finally cracked. "Stefani, this is madness. We're not farm workers. Ryan has a university education, a career." I corrected gently. He had a career. Now he has the chance to learn the value of physical labor. I turned to my son, who was looking at me as if I had become a stranger. "Ryan, remember when you were 8, and you wanted that expensive bike for your birthday?" His eyebrows furrowed. "What does that have to do with anything?" "I told you if you wanted it, you had to earn half the money yourself. You mowed lawns all summer, saved every penny. When September came, you had the bike, and something even more valuable. You understood what things are really worth." "Mom, that was different. I was a kid learning a lesson." "And what are you now?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "Because 2 months ago, you were the man who told your homeless mother she should have stayed married if she wanted comfort. Today, you're the man asking that same mother for shelter. So tell me, Ryan, what are you now?" His face flushed red. "I'm your son." "Yes, you are. And that's the only reason you're standing in this little house instead of sleeping in your car." I moved toward the door. "Jeffrey will bring you the basics, towels, sheets, soap. In the basement of the main house, there's a washer and dryer. You can use them twice a week." "Wait," Laura struggled to stand, clutching her lower back. "What about medical care?" "I have prescriptions and prenatal checkups. The hospital is 40 minutes away." There's a 2018 Honda Civic in the barn, reliable transport. You can use it for essentials, medical appointments, shopping in town. The keys hang on the hook by the barn door. Ryan's mouth dropped open. You have a car just sitting in the barn. I have a few things you don't know about, Ryan. I've discovered I'm pretty good at acquiring assets when properly motivated. That evening I sat on my front porch with a glass of wine, watching Ryan and Laura unload their things. Jeffrey moved his few possessions into the main house with cheerful efficiency, insisting he preferred the large bedroom and private bath I'd offered him upstairs. This beats cable TV, Jeffrey said, settling into a chair next to me with his own glass. The look on that woman's face when she saw the kitchen. Laura's used to certain standards, I replied. This will be instructive. Through the cabin windows, I could see them navigating the tight spaces, trying to figure out where to put their king-sized bed in a room meant for a double, how to fit their extensive wardrobe into a closet the size of a phone booth. Mrs. Harris, Jeffrey said cautiously, may I ask why you're doing this? I mean, they're family. Are they really? I sipped my wine, watching Ryan struggle with a box clearly too heavy for him. Jeffrey, what makes someone family? Biology, legal documents, or how they treat you when you're vulnerable? He was silent for a moment. My parents kicked me out when I came out as gay. Said I was no longer their son if I was going to live in sin. My girlfriend's mother accepted me, helped me apply to college, co-signed my student loans. She's more family to me than the people who share my DNA. Exactly. Family is what you build, not what you're born into. As if summoned by our conversation, Ryan appeared on the cabin porch. Even from a distance, I could see the weariness in his shoulders, the way he looked out over the darkening fields like a man considering escape routes he didn't have. He looks lost, Jeffrey observed. He is lost. For the first time in his adult life, Ryan is facing the consequences of his choices. It's terrifying when you're used to others absorbing the cost of your comfort. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen watching the sunrise paint the pastures gold. A cup of real, expensive coffee warmed my hands. Through the window, I could see Ryan cleaning Thunder's stall, his movements now efficient, his gentle business hands calloused from months of honest work. The transformation was remarkable to witness. Good morning, Mrs. Harris. Jeffrey appeared in the doorway, little Edward cooing peacefully in his arms. At 3 months old, he was a beautiful baby, dark hair like his father, Laura's green eyes, and a temperament surprisingly calm given the circumstances of his birth. Good morning, Jeffrey. How did he sleep? Like an angel. Laura still exhausted. I told her I'd take the first feeding so she could rest. Jeffrey settled into the kitchen chair I had placed near the window months ago, holding Edward to his shoulder with practiced ease. It was wonderful how naturally Jeffrey had taken on the role of surrogate grandmother when Laura gave birth 6 weeks early. Stress, the doctor said. Jeffrey was the one who drove them to the hospital, the one pacing the waiting room, the one who brought them home to the little house where the crib now took up most of the smaller bedroom. I visited them exactly once, bringing a casserole and a handmade blanket I found at a local craft fair. Laura cried when she saw it, the first genuine tears I had seen from her, born of exhaustion and gratitude, not self-pity. Mrs. Harris, she whispered, holding Edward as I spread the blanket over the worn sofa in the little house. I know what you do, but he's innocent in all this. Yes, I agreed, smoothing the edges of the blanket. He is. That's why he has a roof over his head and food in his belly, and people who love him. I met her eyes then, seeing something I hadn't expected. Acceptance. What he doesn't have is a grandmother who lets his parents take that love for granted. Now, watching Jeffrey coo over Edward while Ryan worked in the barn, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not the desperate silence of survival, but the deep satisfaction of justice served and lessons learned. He's getting stronger, Jeffrey said, following my gaze toward Ryan. Both physically and otherwise. He was right. The soft leader who had kicked me out 6 months ago had been replaced by someone leaner, steadier, more thoughtful. Physical labor had burned off his corporate arrogance, and the complete shift in power dynamics had taught him humility. Yesterday he asked me about expanding the rescue program, Jeffrey continued. Said he was thinking about how we might take in more horses, maybe some cattle from that closing farm up north. Really? I sipped my coffee, unsurprised but pleased. Ryan had always been smart. He just needed his assumptions challenged to remember how to think beyond his immediate comfort. And Laura is helping with the bookkeeping. She's actually pretty good with numbers, better than me. That was news. Since when? About a month. She asked if there was anything she could do to help with the business side while she's breastfeeding. Said she studied accounting before switching to marketing. Jeffrey shifted Edward to his other arm. I think she's trying to prove she belongs here. Through the window, I watched Ryan come out of Thunder's stall and walk toward the little house. His gait was different now, less hurried, more purposeful. He stopped at the door of the little house, glanced back at the main house, and I saw him notice my silhouette in the kitchen window. He raised a hesitant hand in greeting. I didn't wave back but didn't look away either. They're different people than they were 6 months ago, Jeffrey said quietly. We all are. It was true. The woman who slept on that sofa, who begged for one night in a real bed, who accepted cruelty as the price of family connection, she was gone. In her place was someone tougher but infinitely more substantial. Someone who understood that love without respect is just manipulation, that family without reciprocity is just exploitation. Edward made a soft sound, and Jeffrey began gently rocking him. Mrs. Harris, may I ask you something? Of course. What happens now? I mean, they've learned what you wanted them to learn. Ryan works harder than anyone I've ever seen. And Laura, she's not the same person who used to call you Stephanie like it was a dirty word. So, what's the endgame? It was a fair question, one I had asked myself as months passed and the little house became less prison and more home for my son's family. What do you think should happen? Jeffrey was quiet for a long moment, his attention seemingly focused on Edward's tiny fingers curling around his own. I think, he finally said, some people deserve second chances, but I also think second chances need to be earned, not given. And you think they've earned it? I think they're trying. A knock at the back door interrupted my thoughts. Through the glass, I saw Laura holding a manila folder, her hair neatly braided, her face showing the cautious composure of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. Come in, I called. Laura entered hesitantly, as if stepping onto forbidden ground. Good morning, Stephanie. Jeffrey, she nodded to both of us, then focused on her son in Jeffrey's arms. How's my boy this morning? Perfect, as always, Jeffrey said. Laura shook her head. Well, actually, I was hoping the three of us could talk. I gestured toward the kitchen table. Sit down. Laura carefully placed a manila folder in front of her, her hands trembling slightly. I've been working on the rescue service's finances, as Jeffrey mentioned. Organizing receipts, tracking expenses, looking for ways to improve efficiency, and I found something I think you should see. She opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets printed on our cabin's old printer, columns of numbers in Laura's neat handwriting. Stephanie, this place is incredible. The rescue service has helped more than 60 animals in 6 months. Adoption fees and donations cover most operating costs. But more than that, she pulled out a second page, one with different numbers. You've created something sustainable, something that can grow. With the right investments, maybe some grant applications, this could become a major regional institution. I studied the papers, impressed despite myself. Laura had identified cost savings I had missed, potential revenue sources I hadn't considered, growth opportunities that could triple our capacity within 2 years. "This is excellent work," I finally said. "Thank you." Laura's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Stephanie, I know why we're here. I know what this is really about, and I know we deserve it." Jeffrey shifted in his chair, Edward peacefully asleep in his arms, seemingly unaware of the weight of the conversation around him. "Ryan and I have talked," Laura continued, "about everything. About how we treated you. About the people we became when things were comfortable for us. About the parents we want to be for Edward. And what kind? Parents who teach him that family means showing up when people need you. Parents who model gratitude, not entitlement. Parents who understand that love is a verb, not just a feeling." I leaned back in my chair, studying this woman who once dismissed me as an inconvenience in her perfect life. "Those are good words, Laura, but like Jeffrey said, actions matter more." "I know. That's why I wanted to show you this." She pulled out the final document, official letterhead, legal language, signatures at the bottom. "Ryan and I want to transfer the cabin to you permanently. No rent, no conditions. We've lived there 6 months, and we'd like to continue living there if you accept us. Not as a family taking advantage, but as employees earning their place." The document was a formal lease agreement, drafted by a city lawyer, offering their services as full-time farm managers in exchange for housing and modest salaries. It was comprehensive, professional, and utterly unnecessary. "Why?" I asked. Tears welled in Laura's eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Because you gave us more than shelter, Stephanie. You gave us a chance to become people we could respect. People Edward could be proud of. People who deserve to be part of what you've built here." Through the window, I saw Ryan loading bales of hay onto the truck. His movements were strong and confident. 6 months ago, he would have hired someone else to do this work. Now, he took pride in doing it himself, and doing it well. "There's one more thing," Laura said quietly. "Something Ryan doesn't know I'm telling you." I waited. "He talks to Edward about you. Every night when he puts him to bed, he tells him stories about his grandmother, how smart you are, how strong, how much you've sacrificed for the people you love. He's never said this to your face, but he knows what he lost when he chose cruelty over kindness." Jeffrey stood quietly, carrying Edward toward the door. "I'll give you two some privacy." When we were alone, Laura reached across the table and touched my hand. Our first physical contact since the day she arrived at my gate, desperate. "Stephanie, I can't undo what we did to you. But I can promise that if you give us a chance, we'll spend the rest of our lives proving we learned from it." I looked down at our joined hands, hers soft, though no longer manicured, mine calloused from months of physical work that I found I truly enjoyed. Two women who started as adversaries, now united by a small person sleeping in Jeffrey's arms, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving one's worst impulses. "The house is yours," I finally said. "Not as a gift, but as something you earned." Then Laura's tears came, months of held-back gratitude and relief spilled onto my kitchen table. "But Laura," I continued, and she lifted her eyes through the tears, "if you ever make me feel invisible again, if you ever treat my love like something you're entitled to rather than something you're grateful for, this arrangement is over. No second chances, no explanations. Do we understand each other?" Crystal clear. I nodded toward the window where Ryan was securing the load. "And your husband? He knows." He waited for me to find the courage for this conversation. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He said to tell you he's ready to apologize when you're ready to hear it." I stood and moved to the window to watch my son working. He moved with purpose now, with dignity earned through sweat and humility. The soft leader was gone, replaced by someone I could truly respect. "Tell Ryan," I said without turning, that apologies are good, but I care more about the person he's becoming than the person he was. Outside, Thunder neighed from his pasture, and Ryan looked up at the sound, smiling at the horse that once scared him. 6 months ago, my son feared anything that demanded real work, real courage, real growth. Now he feared nothing but losing what he had finally learned to value. That, I thought as Laura gathered her papers and headed back to the cottage where her family waited, was exactly how it was meant to be. A year later, I stood on the same porch watching Ryan teach little Edward how to stroke Thunder's nose. The boy giggled with delight, his tiny fingers barely touching the horse's velvety coat. Thunder, patient and gentle as always with children, stood still, allowing himself to be explored. "See, Eddie," Ryan said in a soft voice. "You have to be gentle. Thunder's big and strong, but he has a kind heart." Laura stood nearby, now managing our books and coordinating adoptions. Her work was impeccable, and her dedication to the rescue program undeniable. She had found her calling in helping animals in need of a second chance. Jeffrey, now my official veterinary assistant, appeared from the barn with a report on our newest rescues, 3 dogs from an abuse case slowly learning to trust people again. "Mrs. Harris," he said approaching me, "the Miller's dogs are making good progress. Maggie even let me scratch behind her ears this morning." "Time and patience," I replied, watching my family, because that's what they had become, interact with the animals we saved. "All they need is to know they're safe." Ryan lifted Edward, the boy still reaching toward Thunder. "Mom," he said approaching the porch. He had been calling me Mom for months now, but it still warmed my heart every time. "I was thinking maybe tonight we could have dinner together. In the main house. Laura made your favorite casserole." I smiled at the person who had learned to earn his place in my life. "I'd like that." As the sun set over the Meadowbrook pastures, casting everything in golden light, I realized I had finally found what I had been searching for all my life. Not just a family, but a family that understood the value of love, a family that knew the difference between a right and a privilege. The lottery ticket that changed everything now hung framed in my office. Not as a symbol of luck, but as a reminder that sometimes the universe gives us exactly the tools we need to fix what's broken. The numbers, 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, bonus 18, no longer represented an escape from my circumstances. They represented the power to create new ones. And as I watched Ryan carefully show his son how to care for beings weaker than himself, I knew the cycle was finally broken. Edward would grow up knowing family isn't something you take for granted. It's something you work for, cherish, and protect every day. A lesson his father and mother learned the hardest way, but one they could now pass on with pride. After all, I thought, the best second chances are the ones you earn. "Mom, what the hell is going on? You disappeared. You don't answer calls. And now I find you on some farm, playing with horses." I set the brush down and slowly walked to the fence, Thunder following like a loyal dog. "This is my home. These are my animals. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. You're home." His voice cracked slightly. "Mom, how can you afford this? The detective said you bought this place in cash. Where did you get that kind of money?" "Where anyone gets money, Ryan. I earned it." "Doing what?" "You haven't worked in 30 years. I met his eyes over the fence rail. "I worked my whole life. I just wasn't paid for it." He ran his hands through his hair, another childish gesture that months ago would have softened my heart. Now it just looked like weakness. "Look, I know we had tough talks before you left." "Before I left." The words came out sharper than intended. "Ryan, you kicked me out. You literally told me I should have stayed married if I wanted comfort." I was upset. It was a difficult situation. "For you. For me, it was pretty simple. My son chose his wife's comfort over his mother's basic dignity. That's not fair. I turned, and Ryan actually stepped back from the look on my face. Honestly, you want to talk fairness? Let's talk about the 3-bedroom apartment your mother-in-law gave you while I slept on your couch. Let's talk about being told not to use your shower until you and Laura were done. Mom, please. I'm not done. My voice cracked across the pasture like a whip. Let's talk about 35 years of birthdays I threw. Christmas mornings I organized. Scraped knees I bandaged. Nightmares I chased away. Ryan's face paled. I know you sacrificed. Sacrificed. I laughed, a sound without warmth. Ryan, I didn't sacrifice. I invested. I invested 35 years of my life in a man I believed would love me enough to offer more than a couch when I needed help. I love you. That's why I'm here. No, you're here because your comfortable little world is falling apart and you need something from me. I stepped back to the fence, close enough to see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of despair he tried to hide. Tell me, how's the job hunt going? His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Oh, you think I don't know, Ryan? I may be a 62-year-old woman who slept on your couch 2 months ago, but I'm not stupid. I know Henderson and Partners fired you. I know about Morrison's failed account that cost them $500,000. How could you? Just like I know Laura's mother isn't paying for that new apartment. Just like I know you co-signed a loan you shouldn't have to keep your wife's lifestyle. I smiled, and Ryan visibly flinched. Information is just another form of currency, son. And unlike you, I've learned to spend mine wisely. Behind him, I noticed the U-Haul truck pulling up the driveway. What's that? I asked softly. Ryan turned, his shoulders slumped when he saw the truck. Laura climbed out of the passenger seat, her pregnancy now clearly showing at 7 months. Mom, we need help, Ryan finally said, the words bursting out like a confession. The apartment's gone. The bank pulled our loan. We have nowhere to go. I watched Laura approach the fence, her green eyes taking in the property, the animals, the obvious prosperity I'd built while they struggled. When she reached us, she looked straight at me for the first time since that morning in their kitchen.